References towards some of Hillary Clinton's most senior advisors saying, hey, let's use the Russia play against Trump in order to diminish the attention that's going to Hillary Clinton's emails. And it actually...
Sadly, so many of those extremists, those MAGA extremists, take their marching orders from Donald Trump. And when do they break with him? Because at some point, maybe there needs to be a formal deprogramming of the cult members, but something...
Tulsi Gabbard didn't just disagree with Hillary Clinton. She stepped right into the political spotlight, turned the lights on, and started calling out what others were ignoring. If you thought this would be another calm exchange of scripted talking points, think again. This felt more like someone sounding the alarm in a room full of people pretending everything was fine. And once Tulsi began, it became hard for anyone to ignore what was happening.
Well, in the lead up to that 2016 primary election, I started to see very quickly that the decisions that were being made, not in consultation with us as vice chairs of the DNC, but unilaterally by Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who was the chair, who was very close with Hillary Clinton, were made to give an advantage to Hillary Clinton. For example, limiting the number of debates where she would have to face Bernie Sanders, putting them at times where, I think there was one that was scheduled during like the Super Bowl or...
If you're enjoying this, make sure to subscribe to the channel. It helps more than you think. Here's the thing. For years, Hillary Clinton has stood in American politics like an unshakable figure, polished, scripted, and backed by decades of experience and connections. To her supporters, she's proven and resilient. To her critics, she represents a political machine that never really gave up control in Washington. But what happens when someone from within that same system decides to question the image itself?
What's Hillary Clinton like? You're probably the only person in this room who would know.
It wouldn't surprise you to know that she's not too fond of me.
She hates you like the devil hates holy water.
So when I resigned as vice chair of the DNC in 2016, specifically so that I could campaign against Hillary Clinton in that Democratic primary.
That's where Tulsi stepped in, and she didn't hold back. But first, let's rewind to how most people see Hillary Clinton. Former First Lady, Senator, Secretary of State, and the presidential candidate who won the popular vote but didn't win the White House. Depending on who you ask, she's either a victim of political bad luck or the one responsible for her fall.
We were talking about Russia briefly. You and I have talked before about how Hillary Clinton labeled you a puppet of Putin, a Russian asset. Debbie Wasserman Schultz shamefully said the same. And I saw recently President Trump withdrew Hillary Clinton's security clearance, which you had to do.
Yes.
I mean, that must have been a little fun. Right? Oh, just a little fun.
I smiled.
Of course you did. You're only human.
Yeah, I am.
So yeah, that's over for her.
But through it all, one thing never really changed: the sense of power around her. She always appeared deeply connected to the inner workings of Washington, where major decisions are made long before the public even hears about them. Tulsi Gabbard looked at that image and, in her own way, said, "Let's take a closer look at it."
Look at the newly declassified Durham appendix. You'll see a number of quite shocking statements in there coming from people like then DNC chairwoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz, talking about how, and I'm paraphrasing here, but Hillary Clinton's emails were deleted just in time.
And just like that, the conversation shifted. This wasn't about personalities. It wasn't about hairstyles, campaign slogans, or social media jabs. Tulsi's criticism focused on something much deeper: foreign policy decisions, regime change wars, and the long-lasting impact of interventions that reshaped entire regions. While many politicians tend to sidestep these issues with careful, polished language, Tulsi spoke about them more directly, like someone who understands the consequences. That's what made it uncomfortable. Tulsi isn't just another voice sharing opinions from a studio. She served in the military. She was deployed. She built her political identity around opposing what she sees as reckless foreign involvement. So when she spoke, she questioned the judgment, the intent, and the outcomes of interventions that, in her view, have destabilized countries and strengthened extremist groups. Whether people agreed with her or not, the impact was clear. She opened up a conversation that many establishment figures would rather keep closed.
I'm just thinking, like, if our purpose and our cause is to increase involvement and engagement in our democracy, to get more people to pay attention, to learn more about these different candidates, to actually have a real dialogue about these important issues, why would you be punishing someone for going out and trying to engage in doing exactly that? Why would you be trying to limit the debate that the American people can be exposed to and involved with? And it was very clear why those decisions were made, to give an advantage to Hillary Clinton, who was designated as the one that the Democratic...
And Hillary Clinton didn't just represent a person in that debate. She represented an era, the period of bipartisan agreement on intervention, where questioning foreign policy often came with political consequences. Tulsi didn't just raise questions. She challenged that thinking directly. But here's where it gets even more interesting. This clash wasn't only about ideas, it also felt generational. Hillary Clinton's style of politics was shaped in the 1990s and early 2000s, a time built on institutional loyalty and carefully controlled messaging. Tulsi's approach connected with something newer, driven by voters who are tired of long wars and more skeptical of established power. And that contrast made the moment stand out. Clinton supporters saw Tulsi's criticism as risky and self-serving. Her critics pointed to long-standing ties between government and private interests and a sense that accountability doesn't always apply equally. That's a complicated space to step into, because once you start questioning the system itself, it's no longer just about one person. It becomes about networks, relationships, and years of history. Tulsi's critics said she was oversimplifying complex global issues. Her supporters believed she was bringing attention to difficult truths others chose to avoid.
I think it was the first debate, the first primary debate that they had, first or second. It was one of the early ones. And I was doing an interview with MSNBC outside the hall of the debate. I think it was in Miami. And I don't remember who the host was, but I could see them and hear them in my ear. And they said, "Tulsi Gabbard, you're coming out and criticizing Hillary Clinton and her foreign policy record. Aren't you afraid of what she'll do to you?" He asked me this on live television on MS.
And here's the twist. The louder the backlash grew, the more attention the clash received. It wasn't just cable news chatter anymore, it started to feel symbolic. Tulsi versus Hillary came to represent something bigger, a tension between outsider voices and established power. But let's slow down for a moment, because it's easy to turn political conflicts into simple good versus bad stories. Reality is usually messy. Hillary Clinton's defenders point to her long record of public service, her experience handling global challenges, and the difficult choices she had to make. They argue that judging those decisions later ignores the limits and information available at the time. For years, major political figures operated in a more controlled media environment. Messages were filtered, shaped, and carefully explained. But in today's digital world, a single clip can spread in minutes. One sharp statement can take off before any official response is ready. Tulsi understood that shift. She delivered her criticism in a way that was clear, direct, and quick to spread, forcing reactions. In politics, a reaction typically indicates that the message was effective.
It actually points to statements about how Hillary herself approved one of these plans that was put forward again before her to heighten tensions around this Russia hoax, this alleged Russia collusion with Donald Trump, to draw attention away from her and away from the controversy that was surrounding her at that time. These documents also show that President Obama was briefed on this before the election, and how at that point in time he talked about how he didn't want his legacy to be tainted by Hillary Clinton.
The public reaction was unsurprisingly divided. Some voters respected Tulsi's boldness in challenging powerful figures within her own former party. Others saw it as divisive and potentially harmful. However, it was evident that this disagreement was not a private matter. It was a very public reckoning over legacy, and legacy matters. For Hillary Clinton, legacy has always been central. The first woman to secure a major party's presidential nomination, a career spanning decades of influence. Tulsi's critiques didn't just question individual policy choices. They challenged how parts of that legacy might be remembered. That's why it felt so personal to many observers. Yet beneath the personalities, a bigger question lingers. Who is authorized to define the truth about America's recent political history? Is it the policymakers who insist they acted with the best information available? Tulsi has confronted that challenge directly, but she's also carved out an identity around refusing to shy away from controversial positions. Whether you see that as courage or strategy depends largely on your political perspective.
By the way, when you look at the 51
Mark Zaid, I love
former
that.
intelligence
Sorry.
officials who signed that Hunter Biden disinformation letter and never apologized for it, never held themselves accountable for it. Yes, Mark Zaid, you had Letitia James and
Why
others.
did she even have one?
Well, some of them didn't have clearances, but they had access to classified information, and so we took away that access for those
Yeah, Alvin Bragg.
who didn't have clearances. Yes.
Okay.
And there are more to come, and this is part of what we're doing.
But one thing is undeniable. The clash between Tulsi Gabbard and Hillary Clinton forced a conversation many assumed was settled. It reopened debates about interventionism, establishment politics, and holding leaders accountable long after they leave office. And maybe that's the bigger story, not who won the exchange, not which clip went viral, but that a former presidential candidate faced a direct challenge from someone willing to question the foundation of her foreign policy record in front of the entire country. That's not routine politics. That's disruption. In the end, Tulsi's challenge to Hillary Clinton wasn't just about one policy or one accusation. It was about establishing a distinction between two governance approaches, one deeply institutional and the other unafraid to confront the system. And when the ground shifts like that, the aftershocks don't quietly fade. They ripple outward, sparking conversations at dinner tables, on podcasts, and inside campaign war rooms, where strategists suddenly realize the scripts they've relied on for years may no longer hold the audience.
First, Putin's principal interests relating to the 2016 election were to undermine faith in the U.S. democratic process, not show any preference of a certain candidate. In fact, this report shows Putin held back from leaking compromising material on Hillary Clinton prior to the election, instead planning to release it after the election to weaken what Moscow viewed as an inevitable Clinton presidency.
And that's exactly what happened here. Tulsi's challenge didn't come out of nowhere. It tapped into a wider frustration felt across the political spectrum. The sense that the same names, the same networks, and the same foreign policy approaches keep repeating, no matter who wins an election. For some voters, Hillary Clinton embodies that continuity. Not chaos or incompetence, but steady, unchanging continuity. And for those who see that as a problem, it's exactly why Tulsi's challenge resonated. She didn't just criticize a single person. She questioned the whole system, the intelligence briefings used to justify interventions, the think tanks shaping policy consensus, and the revolving door between public office and private influence. When she spoke, it wasn't just a critique. It was a crack in the narrative that American foreign policy is purely the product of sober, unavoidable necessity. Clinton's defenders push back, arguing that governing is rarely black and white. They highlight the complexity of international threats, shifting alliances, humanitarian crises, and the constant pressure to act. They argue that leadership often requires making imperfect choices in a world where perfect options simply don't exist.
Democratic Party powers that be wanted to win that election. And so their lack of integrity, coupled with the fact that Hillary Clinton wanted to be our commander-in-chief. I still serve in the Army Reserves now for almost 20 years. So for me, as someone serving in the reserves at the time, as well as a member of Congress, as well as an American, to have her in a position where both Democrats and the mainstream media...
Tulsi's response to that mindset has always been sharper. Complexity, she argues, doesn't remove accountability. Difficulty doesn't erase consequences. And good intentions don't automatically lead to good outcomes. That philosophical divide is what made this clash resonate far beyond just the two women. It revealed a fault line in American politics that has been widening for years. On one side, there's the belief that American power, when used strategically, can stabilize the world. On the other, the belief that American intervention often makes things worse. Hillary Clinton's career aligns with the first view. Tulsi's is built on the second. So when Tulsi went on the offensive, it felt less like a personal feud and more like a referendum. And referendums make people uneasy because they demand reflection. Suddenly, old headlines are revisited, past speeches re-examined, and decisions once defended as necessary are scrutinized under a new light. Social media magnifies every clip, every debate moment, every archived policy memo. In the digital age, history isn't fixed, it's searchable. Tulsi spoke in a way that made it clear these weren't just abstract policy debates, they were about real human costs. And that framing changed the emotional temperature of the conversation entirely.
The next day I went back to the House of Representatives, went back to work in Congress, and my Democrat colleagues looked at me like I was a dead man walking. And some of them, came up to me and patted me on the back, and they were like, okay, well, you have zero future in politics, number one. Number two, Hillary Clinton will get elected, and your constituents in Hawaii will not get a single penny for anything that they need. You did that by coming out against Hillary Clinton.
It's one thing to debate geopolitical strategy. It's one thing to talk about lives disrupted and regions torn apart. By focusing on consequences rather than credentials, Tulsi framed herself as a voice for those who feel the establishment treats war like a distant game on a board. Critics, of course, push back. They say her framing oversimplifies a complex global web. Pulling back from intervention, they argue, can create humanitarian crises. Power vacuums aren't solved by inaction alone. And hindsight always makes decisions look cleaner than they were in the moment. And they're not wrong. But Tulsi's impact wasn't about settling that debate in a single exchange. It was about making it impossible to ignore. Hillary Clinton, meanwhile, represents resilience. She has weathered investigations, electoral losses, relentless scrutiny, and decades of public controversy. For many, conflicts in Iraq, Libya, and Syria aren't just past policy debates. They're ongoing case studies shaping the present. Endless military commitments, veterans struggling back home, and budgets tilted toward defense while domestic issues wait. Tulsi's critique found traction precisely in that space.
In the January 2017 intelligence community assessment that President Obama ordered, John Brennan, who was CIA director at the time, and the intelligence community intentionally suppressed intelligence that showed Putin was saving the most damaging material that he had in his possession about Hillary Clinton until after her potential and likely victory. The report goes into great detail about the information that Russia and Putin had on Hillary Clinton, which included possible criminal...
But here's the paradox. Challenging power doesn't automatically mean you replace it. Political machines don't crumble from a single confrontation. They adapt. They push back. They reframe the narrative. So the real question isn't whether Tulsi won or Hillary lost. It's about whether the conversation itself shifted. And that answer is still unfolding. Because what this clash revealed goes beyond a personal rivalry. If anything, it's highlighting a deeper tension. When a system is questioned from within, it doesn't just defend itself, it changes. And when critics refuse to back down, they don't just stir controversy. They redefine what counts as acceptable debate. This wasn't just a political spat. It was a moment where two eras collided, visible to the entire public. It's about how that clash mirrors a country still wrestling with its past choices and its future direction. Once the monument is questioned, people start reading the plaque differently. And when that happens, history doesn't feel quite as settled as it once did.